All right, everybody, we are live. I am so excited to be here. For anyone who doesn't know this, this is a very special day for me because this is my very first LinkedIn Live. You might not have watched many LinkedIn Lives before, but you have to get approved to do it. So you have to be special. And I finally got the approval and I'm so pumped about it. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation and to talk to you all. So everyone, as you're coming on in, get settled, get situated. It is great to see you all coming. If you don't know me, my name is Beth Santos. I'm founder and CEO of Wanderful. We are an international community of women who love to travel, but we also do a lot to disrupt the travel industry and just make it better for everyone. And so we talk a lot about industry dynamics. We talk a lot about influencer marketing and content creators and grassroots builders in the industry. And we also have a number of really interesting conversations on the industry side. Oftentimes they take the place of more of a formal webinar. This time we're going a little bit more informal, a little bit more Q&A. So some of you are watching, there's two places that you could be, say like there's two places that you can be watching this live stream from. Either you're watching it on YouTube or you're watching it on LinkedIn. And either way, you should be able to comment. So what I want you all to do right now is just get situated. I know you're like ready to do a little passive thing, but Pam, you win. Pam Ivy wins the award of the day. I want you all to introduce yourselves. So drop into the comments who you are, where you're tuning in from. If there's anything in particular that you're hoping to learn today, don't spend too much time thinking through it. But if there's something that you came here for, go ahead and drop that in the comments. Or if you just want to say who you are, where you're from, that's good too. If you want to tell us what company you're representing, we'd love to hear about that too. That'll help us to really focus the conversation. Pam is in Wasaga Beach. Is that Ontario? Boasting the world's longest freshwater beach. And here everyone else is coming in. Hey, Chris. Oh, it's great to see Chris Christensen is here from Silicon Valley. Jacqueline is here from Portico. She's representing Boston South End. Cosette is from Utrecht, the Netherlands. We have Debbie from Portland, Oregon. Hey, Debbie. Great to see you too. Betsy in Greensboro. I see, Jamie. Jamie, I always read your name as DeLuca, but it's LaDuca. I don't know how many people probably do that to you, but Jamie LaDuca is here from Massachusetts. Kate Morton is from Plymouth, Mass, one of my favorite cities, awesome city. Teresa's in St. Louis, but is in Little Rock, Arkansas today, because I know for a fact Teresa is doing this like whole road trip all around the southern United States, and we're all super jealous of her. Brandy, hi Brandy. Oh, this is so fun. It's like all of my favorite industry contacts. Ann Becker's in Chicago, Cooper's in Kansas City, Missouri, Kim is in Adairsville, Georgia, Judy Lamb Maxwell in Vancouver, Brittany in Cape Cod, somebody else in Washington, D.C. Who are you? Oh, Nathia. Nathia, I don't know if I'm saying your name wrong or not, but I'm going to have to ask you at some point because you've come to so many of our events. Lauren's in Bogota. It's great to see all of you here, and we're going to have a really great conversation. So now you know where all the comments are, and I'm going to show, this is one of my favorite things is I get to actually show people coming in on the screen. So I'll do this while we talk too, if I don't forget. And so now you all know where the comments are, which means feel free to be part of this conversation. If you've seen me do a live before, you'll know that I like to keep it lively, right? Like engaged, activated. I want you all to ask questions. I can ask tons of questions, but I want you all to participate in this and share your insights, share your experiences, get everything that you can out of it. Meet each other, right? If somebody comments something that's really great, comment back and say, hey, I'd like to get to know you more. I think, when we're in this space of virtual, we have to rely on that virtual for our networking. So use that and use each other. That's what we're all here for. Now, I want to introduce my guest today, who is a fantastic, not only friend, but expert in the industry, Tess Darci of 143 Communications. Hi, Tess.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to do this.
We're so excited to have you.
First LinkedIn Live.
Oh my gosh, you are going down in history. Oh, that's StreamYard leaving a little note. You are going down in history as my first LinkedIn Live guest. So thanks for coming in today and sharing your insights. And I think this is such a good conversation because, first of all, nobody knows what the freak is going on in travel these days. And we're all looking for answers. And unfortunately, the answers are so muddled. And I know for myself, with Wanderful, I really feel like, and tell me everyone in the comments too if you feel the same way. I really feel like there was a moment here in 2021 where we were kind of going, okay, travel's gonna, be bouncing back. Like 2021 is the year, and then
I
the Delta
know.
variant came in, and it sort of, everyone sort of took a little back step
Yeah.
again, and so we're kind of in this place of not really knowing how we should talk about this, how long we should be waiting, what we should be preparing for. Should we be completely pivoting, even though we thought that we would be frankly over,
Yeah.
with COVID precautions by now. And so I'm really looking forward to this conversation, really looking at it from a PR and communications and marketing perspective.
Mhm.
And so Tess, tell me a little
Yes.
bit just about yourself. I want everyone to get a sense of your background, what kind of brings you to who you are today.
Yeah, yeah. So thank you again for having me. This is so fun. So my background, I started in the PR and marketing agency world. I had quite a few travel clients, and then over time, I went in house and I went to a startup called FlipTea, which was a vacation rental marketplace, and we were acquired by TripAdvisor when I was there. So then I got to be part of the TripAdvisor family, which was so much fun. And then I went to EF Education First and worked for a number of entities under that group. And most recently, I was with their adult tours division. And then earlier this year, I decided to co-found my own boutique PR agency with my co-founder, Jamie. We had met years and years ago in the agency world and had this dream to do this. And now just seemed like the right time. We wanted to take our expertise and offer it to brands that may not have an in-house PR discipline or influencer marketing expertise. So that's where I am now.
And I know at 143, you guys are not just doing travel, you're doing all sorts of
Yes,
companies.
we're doing travel, fashion, various consumer products. It kind of runs the gamut. So a little bit of everything.
And they were making this really funny comment the other day that funny and true. And I hope I'm not putting you on the spot, but they were like, it's so funny. A lot of our clients are like socially minded. A lot of them are women owned. Like
Yeah.
we've really carved out this really neat community of like supporting other entrepreneurs.
Yeah, it just happened organically. Me and my co-founder Jamie had our second babies in 2020, which was crazy having a baby during a pandemic.
Yeah.
And we
Amen.
just, yeah, you did, like many of us have. And so we just organically started talking to other women-founded businesses, and that's sort of where the path we've been going down, which has been really, really wonderful.
So I want to dive in a little bit to the heart of this conversation because we only have a short period of time together. We're trying to keep this to 30 minutes. We might go a little bit over for everyone to know, just so you can kind of plan your timing here, your lunch break. But let's just talk about how people are talking about travel these days.
Yeah.
Like, what's going on? What are you seeing in terms of how people are choosing to have that conversation?
Yeah, it's really tricky because this time last year, people weren't really traveling. They were hoping things were going to get better. We were looking forward to the vaccines. And then unfortunately, Delta happened. And
Yeah.
what's happening now is I think we're going back to where we were last year, where people are thinking again about trips that just require a car ride. They're shorter, they're more local, more domestic. That being said, and Beth, you and I have talked about this, people are traveling more now abroad than last year. It was really no one was traveling.
Yeah.
But the people that are traveling abroad just have so much more to think about as far as vaccines, testing, and understanding what the requirements are, where you're going. So it's really complicated, and it requires so much more research for the consumer and so much more providing information and transparency as a brand and as marketers.
Yeah. Well, and I think we have already touched on the fact that there's this like ebb and flow that's just happening across the board, right? First, I mean, I think we all remember even the beginning, second quarter of 2020, when us in travel, many of us are working in travel. That's why we're all here. We were like afraid to even talk about travel. Like we were even afraid to mention travel. Like God forbid we were going to, implicitly suggest that somebody go out there. And there was a lot of like, we're just talking about this, abstractly, and I'm not telling you to go. And I think, and Brittany, you actually just shared a comment too. She's like, I'm a travel blogger and I still don't feel comfortable promoting travel. So
I
I think
know.
like it's super, and then also it's super regional, and it's depending on the country and,
Mhm.
their policies. And so I'm curious just how you have seen this shift, and from, first this hard no of travel, then sort of people are kind of open to doing it. Then some people are doing some travels. Then we sort of dial back a little bit. What kind of advice do you have for travel brands that are sort of trying to follow this, but also, I don't know, I'm going to stop talking because I want to
Yeah,
hear
no,
you.
no, no. I think that one of the biggest things is, as a travel brand, is being that safety blanket for your customers and your travelers, because everyone's really confused and it's really hard to find information. And
Yeah.
there's the CDC website, there's whitehouse.gov, but it's hard to find the information and it's literally changing daily. And then layer in that it's different domestically, country by country, even state by state, town by town. So I think one of the best things we can do as marketers is provide the information in a concise, transparent way. And so what I would really recommend on your marketing teams is that you have someone that has a pulse on this and is looking at the information every day, reading the news articles, and then distilling it and putting it in a place where it's really easy for the consumer to digest, so that they can make an informed decision and decide what they're comfortable with. I think it's so important to make your customers feel like you know what's going on and make them feel comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And also, as things ebb and flow and change, having someone that says, okay, this has changed now, and we need to change all of our marketing materials. We need to change what we're
Yeah.
putting on social media, and being able to be nimble and pivot really quickly right now.
Well, and I think to that point of being nimble, like keeping in mind what decisions you're making that are long term and which ones are short term and
Mhm.
which ones are easy to be changed. For
Yeah.
example, if you print a whole bunch of materials, it's going to be a lot of money to just
Yeah,
reprint
that's a great
something
point.
that might have changed,
Mhm.
so thinking about leaning into, you know, good long-term things like search engine optimization,
Yes.
but also good things that can pivot. Like I know we've talked about influencer marketing as like a really good solution right
Influencer
now.
marketing is such a great solution, because you can go and look at, XYZ person in the south of France, and, oh, that cafe I love is actually open, or that restaurant, or I can do X, Y, and Z excursion. If you can find the influencers that are in the areas that you'd want to visit, you'll know in real time if things are open or shut, or what's going on. Because again, it's changing all the time. So staying informed will really help. Um,
Do you think that I'm thinking about this from the perspective of a travel company that's hearing this message of, okay, we have a responsibility to inform people, to, give them the most up to date information possible about their travel experiences. I think I'm also a little bit scared hearing that, because it also means like, what happens if I neglect to update something and then it's putting a traveler in like a bad situation? Like I never want somebody to be relying on me and then I fail and now I've hurt them. Like have you ever, what would you say to
Yeah,
that?
that's a good question. I think, we're all doing the best that we can. And like I said, the information is changing so much. So I think just having it in a concise place, putting it out there, we can only control so much right now. And I think the consumer understands that too. Borders are closed, borders, will close. Testing and vaccine requirements change weekly. So I think just doing the best that we can to show that we're supportive and we're being transparent. I think when there's a gray area, it makes people really nervous right now. So if you
Yep.
as a company make decisions and protocols, the best thing you can do is put them out there and be really, really honest. Because if people are seeing a gray area or some indecisiveness, I think it might make a customer move on to another company or brand.
That's a
Um,
really good point.
so I think, again, just being really, really honest with what you're doing. Delta is a great example. They came out with their policies. It was all over the news. They clearly did a proactive PR push.
Mhm.
It I'm sure it was polarizing on some levels. There's so many mixed opinions right now with all of these requirements, but they decided what they decided and they put it out there. And so with Delta, you knew what you were getting into, and I really respected that as a PR professional.
Yeah, so you're talking about, for anyone who missed this or was sleeping under a rock, Delta Airlines was like the first, I think, airline, at least in the US, that just required everybody to be vaccinated.
Yeah, and they had a lot. They had a whole laundry list of all of their policies, and they just put it out there, and it got a ton of pickup, and they clearly proactively did that, and I think that's
Yeah.
great.
I'm getting some really good comments here that I want to highlight as well about how other people have sort of navigated this in terms of their messaging. Chris Christensen has got a podcast and he's like, we're still talking about travel, even if it's a place I can't go to.
Yeah.
It's still something that we can bring up. And Monet was talking about, I'll read this whole thing to you. Oh, no, you get the whole thing. In the TMC world, we're busy with leisure travel, and corporate has increased dramatically in the last month. We built our own COVID communication tool, and they send out updates.
That's great.
So that becomes like a really neat, feature that people can be looking for. They know that that's available.
And this, everyone in marketing knows, that phrase from years ago, content is king. And this is a great example. Put the content out there about COVID, give people the information they need. And, if you become a great resource for potential customers, maybe they're visiting your site to find out about COVID and travel, and then all of a sudden they're making a purchase.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a great thing. It's a great way to use content to get people coming back to your site or your blog or whatever it might be.
Yeah, Shally's saying they wanted to survive this phase. They came up with these bubble vacations with safety protocols and customized packages. Yeah, and they were actually a hit. So really feeding into what people are looking for. And Monet's saying flexibility is critical. So I think those are all really good points. What do you think about, as a PR professional, coming in where you are advising a lot of these travel companies?
Yeah.
Do you feel like you have like this elevated responsibility to,
yes.
to like correctly advise?
It's true. I mean, in the last 18 months, and I've worked across various industries. I've been doing this for 16 plus years. But in the last 18 months, I've never worked as a PR professional in such an incredibly tumultuous landscape. Every day things are changing, new announcements. No one knows what they're talking about. All different media outlets are saying all different things. And it's really tricky. And so I think it's your responsibility as the PR expert within your business, or, if it's your client, just constantly stay on top of the news and make sure that you're looking at viable sources and knowing all the things that are changing. And one of the things that I found really counterintuitive this past 18 months is there were times where I had to advise, let's be quiet. We actually shouldn't talk right now. We're just going to lay low because it might come off as tone deaf. And usually as PR people, we want to shout everything, to the world and tell everyone that will listen about our client or whatever company we're working for. And I think there were a lot of moments the last 18 months where that could really hurt you as a brand if you pitched a reporter at the wrong time or went out there with a new product at the wrong time. You had to be really careful and strategic about the cadence and when and how you were talking about things. Mm-hmm. And I'd actually say that isn't even just travel, just so many things in the last 18 months. You just really had to be careful.
Yeah. And I think really know yourself and your business and, your business values. And if you don't have that like publicly written somewhere, this, I think, has been a really great time to do that, because I'm seeing even here in the comments, there's some really good things that are coming up. Jacqueline, thanks for sharing this whole, you don't have to necessarily travel to be inspired about travel. And they've been doing that a lot with Portico. But then Debbie's also sharing that, she doesn't feel right encouraging people to travel. And I think that's perfectly okay. I think that there's that just because you're a travel company or you're kind of working in the travel space, it doesn't mean that you need to be like constantly saying travel, travel, travel. And I think there's been some really neat ways that companies have navigated this and said, no, we don't want you to travel right now, at whatever time they shared that message.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
there's, I think there was such an interesting pivot where so many companies were doing these virtual travel experiences. And I think it was the Eiffel Tower and the Louvre and some of those places where you could actually see live images from there. So there's other ways, reading books. I mean, there's so many ways to experience the world without actually traveling. And there's been so many innovations because of the pandemic, which I think is really cool.
yeah. And as I have said many times, you don't have to go far in order to have an amazing travel experience. And in fact, if anything,
Yeah,
I think COVID has really taught us to find travel experiences without leaving our houses, and to have that.
exactly.
Yeah. But
Yep.
but I think to your point, there is so much that has to go into, how and why you're messaging, and for you to do it from a really clear and authentic place. I think if your customer base knows you as somebody who is considering, safety or considering local regulations, then it's not going to come as a surprise to them if that's kind of the message that's coming out of
Right.
you later. So I think that's great. Cosette was saying traveling was definitely different this summer. We crossed several borders in Europe by car. Rules are different per country. Well, and that's another really good point too that I know, Tess, you've made before, which is, you and I are both based in the US, so it's easy to be very US centric.
Yeah.
A lot of us aren't flying transcontinentally. If you're in Europe, you're having to manage a lot of different policies and a lot of different borders at once. And even in the US, state by state,
But state by state, yeah.
city
And then
by
I think
city.
you have to be on it with the testing requirements to get back into our country. And do they have the tests? If you're in South Africa on safari, do they have the right tests for you as an American to get back? And if they don't, or they're not as available, are you prepared to delay your trip? I think those are just a lot of things that we just have to think about now as travelers.
Well, and
That
coming from the perspective of a travel company that's planning travel, I want to ask you about, you mentioned Delta, for example, putting out this vaccine requirement. I know we're seeing a lot more travel companies that are doing that as well. We're seeing conferences that are doing that as
Yep.
well. You know, I would assume that your recommendation would be that at your own and anybody's own company, you all need to get on the same page about what you're doing so
Yes.
that now what should they do?
I think the best thing that you can do, first of all, going back to who you are as a business and honing in on that and making sure that everyone's aligned in their messaging so that no one is, off message, everyone's on board. And so the customer's hearing the same thing over and over again. And then I think the best thing, with events and that type of thing is looking at what the local guidelines are and going by those. Because the local experts know what needs to happen to keep people safe. And I think going by those local guidelines is the best thing you can do as a business.
And I think that, it's funny being in this space where I'm sure you've had the conversation of PR being important and other people
Mhm.
being like, oh, it's just like a, fringe thing on the side. But I think this is a really good example of when having like a very clear PR strategy for your
Yeah.
business is actually like a very essential part of the business,
It's
because safety here is at stake, and being able to
completely.
like really confidently communicate what you're doing, what you've changed, what your values are, that's going to finding that alignment with your target customer base is so critical right now.
And a lot of people, if you're quoted as an expert in a prominent media outlet, that creates trust for the consumer. And that's going to go such a long way. And even if, Beth, you're not ready to travel right now, but you want to travel in 6 months and you saw that, I was quoted from Wanderful, you'd say, okay, that, in the New York Times or whatever it might be, that's going to give you more trust. And as a brand being quoted in those prominent media outlets, it just goes such a long way, and it gets your name out there and builds that trust for the customer so that they're more likely to go with you versus a brand that they might not have ever heard anything about.
And then you're also, it's a little bit more of a long-term thing too, of maybe you're not, maybe you said we're not doing travel for however long, but you're saying what we are doing is investing in our customer. And regardless of, I'm using the example of saying not traveling because I know that's a lot of people's choices, but I know other people in the comments are, they've modified the way they're traveling or that sort of thing. Whatever you've done, I mean, you're really building that trust and that loyalty with your audience as well, so that when you do start to travel more, then you have their ear.
Yes. And by the way, because we're all marketers here, those kind of links too in those stories help so much long term with your SEO and building your domain authority and that kind of thing too. So you're building your online brand equity over a very long period of time, which is super important. That was a big thing we focused on when I was at TripAdvisor. PR was such a big part of the SEO strategy.
Yeah. And I know a lot of content creators are looking at this the same way. They're like, okay, if I'm not going to be traveling as much as I did, I'm going to be focusing on the long game. I'm going to be improving my SEO. I'm going to, build up some articles. I'm going to, like Chris was saying, talk about travel in the past tense or in the future tense, or in the sense of analytics and data and, trends and
relook at your old content. Maybe there's a photo gallery from the south of France. Maybe there's tips on traveling through Eastern Europe, things like that. Look through your old content and how can you repurpose it to build up that SEO while maybe you're not traveling.
Absolutely. And we are watching this for everyone who's watching live. We are streaming this in 2 places. We've got it going on LinkedIn Live, which is super fun. It's my first LinkedIn Live. We also have it going on YouTube. So that means that we're seeing everybody's comments, but you might not be seeing each other's comments always. So I'm going to continue to put as many as I can on the screen and give you all shout outs. But if you have questions or you have, things that you want to share as well, please definitely add them in. I think this has been a really great conversation and hopefully has given some guidance for some people. Tess, you've worked in a number of travel companies, which I think is so interesting, is it's not like you've, been in one place and now you're in PR. You've seen experiences from a number of different organizations across the board. What are some of the things that you've noticed in that time working in travel about how, how consumers make decisions, how they talk about travel, that's really affected them?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So one of the big things I learned at TripAdvisor is the reviews, right? I mean, everyone's probably used TripAdvisor in this group. And I think that the reviews are another form of content, but being able to see real travelers put reviews out there in real time is so important as a consumer, because you can just do your own research. And especially right now, kind of like I was saying, similar to the influencers, you can look and see by reviews, what's open, what's going on, are people wearing masks, are people not, all sorts of things like that. So I think that's such an interesting thing. And another thing with TripAdvisor is just the amount of data we could use to slice and dice various nuggets to push out to the media, to put out on infographics, all that kind of thing was always so interesting. So I think that was a big learning I had when I was over there.
I think that is great. And I think there is, if anything, there is no limit to how many times you can really repurpose good information and update it and bring it back. And I know, Chris, you're getting a lot of love on this idea of taking old travel journals and turning them into articles. I mean, I'm like, oh man, I got to go back to my old gosh, I don't know if I want to share the things I wrote in those journals. But I think that's so valuable. And so the other thing I want to think about here is the fact that we're in this really interesting position where, let's be honest, people are low on money. And by people, I mean travel companies, because, there are not a ton of travel companies that are like killing it right now. For those of you that are, I'm so proud of you and I'm so happy for you and I want to lift you up. But travel has been hit and a lot of travel companies are really hurting. So we also have to be in this place of like maximizing everything that we do, right? Like prioritizing our focus,
Yeah.
prioritizing our budget, maximizing our time. I think PR is one of the things that easily gets cut because we're like, okay, I'm going to do my own PR. Or I'm just going to, reach out to journalists, or maybe I just won't do it at all and I'm going to focus on my product. I mean, what would you say to that during a time like right now?
I think that PR is so critical right now because we don't know what's coming around the corner. Like, we didn't know about Delta. And
Yeah.
having communications professionals either within your business or bringing on consultants, I think is so important because we are versed in how to talk to the media and how to talk to the consumers. And it's just critical. And when to not talk, like I was saying earlier. So I think it's so important, and just getting ahead of it. What can you be doing now through the next 12 to 18 months to stay in front of the media, to be part of those conversations? So I really think it's critical. And PR isn't just traditional media. It's also the influencers. There's so many out there, and influencers are such an integral. I mean, obviously, Beth, with your business, but
Yeah.
they're so important, and people are looking at influencers for all of their buying decisions. And having a strategic micro, macro, nano strategy there to reach all the different consumers and all the different markets is also really important. So yeah, I would say don't cut it.
Like, don't cut it. No,
do it.
but I think those are excellent points, and I think it's not funny, but it's so interesting. I think because like I often have thought about PR as a nice to have, but in this particular time, it's like the importance of really solid PR is like extra, because, and it's not just like, oh, I need to get on Good Morning America or whatever. It's like, I need to make sure that what I'm saying to my audience is right.
Right.
Right. And what I mean
And
by
will
right is like
resonate with your
aligned
audience.
with my company. Yeah. And like
Yeah.
resonates with them correctly and is not totally tone deaf. And, I think that's really important. A really good question that's come in. Do you have or suggest different messaging for different traveler segments?
Yeah,
For
great
example,
question.
over 60 travelers, solo travelers, female travelers that might have different concerns. That's a great
Yeah,
question.
I think that's a great question. And that's where I'd say, if you're a blog or a brand, you really need to make sure you understand your customers, and hone in on that. And there's so many different ways to talk to the different groups. Influencers tend to go a bit younger, versus traditional media. Like, is it over 60? Like, they're probably more likely to be a traditional media. But I think just knowing what your message is and then putting that out there regardless is so important.
Mm. So just being clear and picking
Yeah.
the right media that's going to reach them too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's some great comments happening in the chat too, just about the side of all of this, which is the fact that we are in a time where some people don't feel comfortable traveling. Everybody has different levels of risk and different levels of comfort, right?
Yeah.
Some people feel very adamant that nobody should be traveling. Other people feel very adamant that everybody should be traveling.
And some of
And
us, like you and I, have tiny kids that
some of
we
us
can
have
travel, and
small
they're
children that are unvaccinated,
yeah.
and right. And I think there's hesitation. Cooper, I want to call out your comment here because I think it's really important, where Cooper is leaving on a 10-day Greek cruise on October 1st. Vaccination is required along with a negative test prior to departure. Cooper's comfortable traveling and yet is really hesitant to openly talk about it, but then says, like, from a business perspective, though, I need to. And that really resonates because I think it can be really scary to put yourself out there right now with what you're doing, because I think there is, frankly, a lot of shaming in all directions of, I think this is the way you've decided to do this is wrong. And I think sometimes we also forget how regional these things are, that infection rates are very different in different places, that laws are very different in different places. And so when you're sharing those things in the space of the internet, where we're kind of all on the same playing field, it can be kind of really scary to put out what you're doing because people are reading that without any context. And I'm like, I don't know what to say. Like, what do you do, Tess? But just like, but
I mean,
recognizing
again,
how challenging that is,
I
I
mean,
think.
I go back to, I say this for brands, but also for if you're a blogger or you run a podcast or just you as a person, know who you are, know what you believe in, and just be clear about that and stand by it. So if you're going on your trip and you want to talk about it, then just, embrace it.
Mhm. Well, and I think there's a really good way. I'm sharing some of the comments from Debbie and now from Brittany too, of saying, this is what I'm doing. But not say, this is what I'm doing, and I think you should do it too. Like you can say, this is what I'm doing, this is what my company is doing. I think we're in a place now where people are frankly tired of being home, and there are people whose risk levels have decreased because they're saying, I just want to get out there.
Yeah.
And for those people who do just want to get out there, I think being able to say, here are the ways that you can do this as safely as possible, but you know your own risk better than I do. I mean, that's kind of the best way you can position that message, in my opinion. Is, I don't think we should be afraid of saying, here's ways to be safe, and and being like, oh, am I implying that people should travel? I personally have not been traveling at all. But I think sometimes we fear having this dialogue because we're a little bit afraid that we're, everybody, it's a very sensitive topic right now.
It is. It is. Yeah.
Sorry, I'll get off my soapbox now.
No.
Tess is like, yeah, I don't know what to tell you.
No, it's so tricky. It's a very tough time right now.
But you have to do what's right for you. I think that's ultimately, you have to do it right for you. You have to get your brand on the same page. You have to get your team on the same page. You have to communicate with a conscience, with honesty, with integrity, and
clear and concise messaging, because it's so complicated right now. There's the testing, there's the vaccines, there's so many things to consider. And I think having that message just really clear and concise is so helpful, because life is just really complicated for people right now. So the more you can uncomplicate it and just put it out there is, I think, the best thing you can do.
And by the way, this stuff changes so fast that and by this stuff, I mean, everything from regulations to just how you're feeling personally to the weather and, how you feel about standing outside for something, and so I think it's okay, whatever you decide to put out as your message. Also know that, and Tess, feel free to disagree with me or weigh in differently on this, but I believe it's okay to change your mind later. I mean, this stuff is changing.
Yeah, it's
so
totally. It's changing all the time, and it's really fluid. And again, I think going back to us as marketers, you have to remember that it's really fluid. Things can change on a dime. Have your team ready to switch messaging. To your point, Beth, print materials may not be the best idea right now. Digital.
Don't spend thousands of dollars on printed materials right now. That's the takeaway.
Just be aware, this is fluid, and I think it's going to be fluid for at least another 6 months, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Stay fluid, pivot. Tess, what last things? I know we're hitting overtime now, and I want to make sure that everybody has a chance to take a midday nap or end of day wherever you are. Last things that you would say, and also how people can learn more about your work if they want to find you.
Yeah. So I think one of the only other things I'd say is, we're obviously based in the US. I think this is also a nice moment for our country to try to spotlight places that, I've never been to the Grand Canyon. There's a lot of things I haven't seen in the US. And so I think it's a nice time to spotlight some of those places where you might be able to travel in a car. I went to I did a camping trip on the Cape with my 4-year-old and my husband in an Airstream, which we never would have done. It was alternative camping. We would have never gone there normally. It's only an hour away, but it was so fun and so cool. So take this moment in time to do something that you wouldn't normally do, that might be closer to home and not feel as adventurous, but you might have a lot of fun.
And learn something new and about yourself. I love that.
Exactly. And yeah, my agency is 143communications.com. And you can there's a contact us on our page if you want to get in touch. And thank you so much, Beth. I've loved being part of this. It's such an important conversation that we need to keep having because it's really confusing and overwhelming for people that are, especially in the travel industry.
Completely. And we will continue to have it. So thank you so much, Tess. Everybody who shared comments, you all have been so engaged and so active. I really appreciate you taking the time to share how all of you are navigating this as well, both personally and as businesses. I've learned a ton. I hope you have too. Stay connected, stay tuned with us. If you RSVP'd, we did have an Eventbrite. If you RSVP'd on Eventbrite, you will get an email with more information. If you're not RSVP'd on Eventbrite, then just come and you can follow me on LinkedIn. You can go to 143communications.com. And I'm also going to share with you sheswanderful.com/collaborate, which is our industry page on the Wanderful site where we have an email list you can subscribe to where we do monthly industry insights. We have a whole incredible anti-oppression toolkit as well as an industry resource library with webinars like this one that you can participate and watch. So definitely check it out. And I'm like all jazzed up. We're gonna do more of these now. I'm like hopping on the LinkedIn train.
It was so much fun. So easy.
Yeah, so easy and so fun. Thanks to those of you who have been watching. Really appreciate you being here, especially those who tuned in on LinkedIn. Have a great rest of your day, everybody. And we'll see you next time. Thanks again.
Bye.
Thanks, Tess.
Thank you.